dear viewers, and welcome to a new edition from our program Africa Today. In today's edition, a special edition, we are going to talk about the recent developments concerning the Russian plane which fell yesterday in Sinai. And of course, I would like to offer my deepest condolences for all the families of the victims and the families and the members and friends who lost their loved ones in that very sad crash. And also we are going to talk about the recent India-Africa summit, which was held in Mumbai in India, which was attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. And we start our episode with this report. In his address to the third India-Africa Forum Summit, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi called for bolstering the Indian-African ties to help developing countries strengthen their ties and positions. El-Sisi affirmed the importance of building mutual ties with India and in different fields, as the Asian countries, which host one of the fastest growing economies on the continent, seek to expand its international reach as well as its economic presence in the African continent. Shireen Adel has more details.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi turned on the charm for African leaders, promising $10 billion in credit to back a partnership of prosperity and pitching a broad alliance for global reform. Modi told leaders, including Presidents Jacob Zuma of South Africa, Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria and Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt, that they will raise the level of support for vision of a prosperous, integrated and united Africa that is a major partner for the world. India and Africa are home to 7 in 10 of the world's poor, but are among the fastest growing economies, leading Modi to talk of a vibrant India and resurgent Africa. He promised $10 billion in new credit in addition to $7.4 billion in soft loans, $1.2 billion in aid provided since the first India-Africa summit in 2008. In addition, India will offer grant aid of $600 million. Of that, $100 million would go towards a new India-Africa Development Fund and $10 million to an India-Africa Health Fund. Modi urged India and Africa to speak with one voice on global affairs, including reform of the United Nations. He appealed for African support on trade, saying a World Trade Organization ministerial meeting in December in Nairobi should ensure that free trade talks serve both regions' goals. India is pressing for a permanent deal on food stockpiling, an issue that has complicated the long-running Doha round, arguing that it must hold food to ensure that its 1.25 billion people do not go hungry. Modi also appealed to the African nations to join an alliance of solar-rich countries at the forthcoming UN Climate Summit in Paris to promote clean and affordable energy. The third India-Africa Forum Summit was held in New Delhi from the 26th to the 30th of October. The summit involved more than 40 countries to discuss ways of developing the economic cooperation between the African continent and India. The details follow. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi addressed the third India-Africa Forum Summit with the presence of Indian President. President Sisi expressed hopes that the summit focus on fighting poverty, improving healthcare, developing education within its target goals in accordance with the African Union Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development announced in New York in September. President Sisi said that India is one of the most important examples of cooperation between countries, working for the well-being of developing one. It also contributed to a transition in economic and technical fields of cooperation with Africa since 2008. El-Sisi praised Egypt's non-permanent membership acquired at the UN Security Council as a representative of the African continent, and that developing countries must work on strengthening their positions in the international scene and decisions. He highlighted the importance of African-Indian coordination regarding negotiations on climate change ahead of the UN Climate Change Conference, which will be held in Paris in December, where El-Sisi aims to push forward Africa's and other developing countries' needs. For his part, the Indian president expressed appreciation to President El-Sisi's visit, calling it the foundation for a new era of partnership between India and Egypt. The Indian president said that India is the 6th largest trading partner and the 3rd largest export destination of Egypt, that both countries have a history of working together for peace and development in the world. He also said that the development of new industrial zones around the new Suez Canal provides an opportunity to strengthen economic ties.
And welcome back, our dear viewers. As we promised today, we are having a special episode. We are going to talk about the India-Africa Summit, which took place in New Delhi and was attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi with the participation of more than 40 countries. And of course, we are going to tackle the latest development concerning the Russian plane which fell in Sinai yesterday, and 224 people were lost, among them the crew of the plane. And to shed more light on these issues, we are very much delighted to have our own very special guest, Mr. Mohammed El-Khouri, the international media expert. Hello, Mr. Mohammed, and thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Mohammed, of course, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi started last week tour to the United Arab Emirates, to India and to Bahrain. Yeah. And of course, he attended the India-Africa Summit, which was a very important event with the participation of 40 leaders and officials from the top of the states in order to boost the cooperation between India and the African continent. So how do you see the importance of that summit?
First of all, Mr. Sisi's visit to the Emirates and Al-Bahrain, in my opinion, it is a normal thing. Yeah. Out of the brotherly friendship and brotherly ties between these two Arab countries. As far as his visit to India, as you know, as you said before, it's to attend the summit or forum, India and Africa, or Africa, India. I think, in my opinion, whenever I follow up the movements and the initiatives taken by the Egyptian administration and political machinery, if you apply for this thing, this phenomena, if you apply something which we apply in the media studies, it's called the content analysis. If you apply the method of content analysis in this respect, you will find always the word restoration, restore. I think the Egyptian administration at this time is always trying to restore Egypt's or Cairo's status, either in the field of African liberation or Africa in general, also in the field of relations, reviving the, I'm sorry to say, old relations with a lot of countries, especially with India in particular. Why? 60 years ago, 1955, Cairo and New Delhi signed the first friendship treaty between the two countries. And this treaty, or this convention, paved the way to much more friendly relations between India and Egypt. In the same time, it was a marriage of interests. It was not just rhetoric, but it was something very practical. Yes. It led into, in Cairo or in Egypt, to what we called in the 60s, the joint project, which ended with the first jet jet aeroplane,
Yes.
which has the name of Cairo. You see the Cairo aeroplane between India and Egypt. And it was produced out of this cooperation. In the same time, on the political arena, there was the cooperation or the friendship between President Nasser
Yes.
and Mr. Jawahir Lal Nehru. And also, as you know, President Tito of Yugoslavia, they were the founders of what we call the non-aligned movement. The non-aligned movement, it is still surviving with, albeit a lot of obstacles all over the world, but it is surviving in the political arena. On the economic side, there is the 77 group and China, which is one of the very effective, players on the international arena, and in particular in the United Nations organization. So Mr. Sisi's trip was not just to explore new horizons in the cooperation between the two countries, but it's an exploration, but it has a certain aim to restore, to revive the very friendly relations between India and Egypt. In the same time,
Yes.
I think the Egyptian administration took this decision, and Mr. Sisi went there, bearing in mind that India is no longer only one of the non-aligned countries. India now, as you know, it is part of the new bloc on the international and economic arena,
Yes.
which is called, which comprises or includes India, Brazil, Russia,
Yes.
and South Africa.
Indeed.
You see, India here is a leader even in this group.
The BRIC.
Yes,
The BRICS.
the BRICS. And in the same time, I know by chance that India is one of the big leaders of producing and exporting the software of the computer science all over the world. Before it's only the United States, sometimes Israel.
Yeah.
But India now is a pioneer in this respect, and the Indian scientists, especially the younger generations, are so famous all over the world because they render their services, especially to America and to the West, because they are so excellent in this respect.
Yes.
So I think on the economic side, on the computer science side, on the non-aligned side, India is something to care for and to try to restore bridges of cooperation between them. Then we have Africa. India and China have now very vast and expanded relations with the African countries.
Yeah.
And that happened maybe since they started its 70s and the 80s of the last century.
Yeah.
We are sorry to say that this happened, you see, in the absence of Cairo. Cairo, starting from the 70s and so on, 80s until the end of the century, receded its influence and its activities and its joint ventures. You see, I think Cairo abandoned its status as a pioneer of liberation and independence and economic cooperation with Africa. That was at that time. But now maybe we can restore all these things and try to revive the legacy, but in the light of our logic and in the light of the current circumstances. The past has gone, but now we have the present and the future. So I think Cairo now is trying hard with Mr. Sisi himself to try to revive all these things and to reinvest our influence in Africa, aided with or cooperating with India in this respect.
From your point of view, though, Mr. Mohammed, to what extent it was important for Egypt to participate in that summit, and is it important only for Egypt via India, or also to strengthen its relations and return to its position in the African continent as well, especially after winning the non-permanent seat of the UN Security Council for the coming for the year 2015-2016.
Our new seat in the Security Council, it is something, you know, very useful, and I think Cairo is now trying to invest or to use it as a card in our hands in order to restore our relations, especially with the non-allied countries and the third world in general. But I think it was a package benefit for the presidency, for our president, because it is not just a chance to meet with the Indian Mr. Narendra Modi and the President of India and the other people in India. It was also the package benefit included also the presence of the leaders who came from Africa. That was again another emphasis, re-emphasis, reassertion of Cairo as an African leader who want to re-cooperate again with our continent to which we belong. Maybe it is now via India, but well, we can do it with via India, and in the same time we can do it on our own, because we have a lot of cards which were forgotten or neglected during the last 30, 40 years, and we have to go back to that. But in the light of the logic of our age now, and in the light of the international community's agendas, we have now an agenda to 2030. You see, it was put in the United Nations, which Mr. Sisi himself attended last in September.
Yes.
So, in the light of all these recent and new factors in our arena and in our region, I think the Egyptian administration should work starting with this kind of re-establishment of relations either with India and with Africa, and I think also either with China and with the Mediterranean region.
Mr. Mohammed, some people or analysts are saying that China is no longer booming to that extent, and now India is taking its direction to be the main trade partners or the main economic power in Asia. So how do you see that?
It depends on the perspective through which you are looking at the things. I remember, I think maybe 6-7 years ago, one of the American writers and analysts who has an Indian origin, Mr. Fareed Zakaria, he wrote and issued a book called The Post-American World. You see his vision in the future, about the future of our world, in which America will no longer be the sole superpower. Then he talked about China and India. He called each in a separate chapter in the book. He called India the ally. He predicted that India and America would be allies. But he called China the rival, the opponent, either an ally or an opponent vis-a-vis America. This means that these two Asian powers still have a lot of potential and have a lot of strength in the future, you see. So, but if you look at China, and these days, I think China has some problems, or a lot of problems, like any other big country in the world. Look at what's going on in Western Europe, the European Union, in America itself. They face a lot of problems in the economic arena, as far as their currency is concerned. And in the same time, I think the population problem in China is a very big obstacle which the Chinese leadership is now facing and trying to tackle and trying to solve. Let us say, realistically speaking, that with due respect to what India has achieved in development, in democracy, but still The Indians, our friends in India themselves say that they still have the poverty problem all over India, and they are trying to tackle with it. It is not a shame that you have a problem in economics, in poverty, but the shame that you don't do anything. And that's why in Egypt we say that it's not a shame that our people, some our people are poor, but it's good that you go ahead and try to solve the problem.
Mr. Mohammed, before moving ahead to talk about developments concerning the Russian plane, Egypt is going to host at the beginning of 2016 an African Economic and Investment Summit. To what extent, from your point of view, Egypt is starting to regain its position in Africa and to have more economic and trade and investment opportunities with the rest of the African states?
First of all, if you hold a conference or a forum or anything, it's good, but it should not be. It should not stand alone. It should be an expression of a very vast vision, and this vision should be translated into a plan of action, and this plan of action should be implemented on the ground. The ground here is from Cairo to Cape Town, across our continent. As I said before, we have a legacy and some memories in Africa which we have established. We, when I say we, the Egyptian people, not only the leadership of Nasser or any other problem.
But unfortunately, Mr. Mohammed, and sorry for interrupting you here, that this has changed during the past few years due to many reasons.
I know.
But how can we return to that period where Egypt and Africa were heart and soul together, were one entity?
I have some reservation about return. We have to start again, you see? But
to forget that period.
Yeah. We are no longer the Cairo of the 60s, you see, because Africa is no longer the Africa of the 60s.
Yes, of course.
You have to be realistic and always apply here what we call the realpolitik. The realpolitik that you are facing new realities in Africa. Even the generation of leaders and the sub-leaders in Africa, they have gone, you see, either by passing away or by retiring. But in the same time, some establishments are still there, and we have to invest this establishment. Let us say something. In the 60s, we had something which is called the Al Nasr company for export and import, something like that. And it was used it used to have its branches all over the African capitals. We have to learn the learned lessons from this experience, with its problems, with its mistakes, and also with its positive points. We have to learn these lessons and start anew with a new vision. You see, in the same time, we have to invest our potential. We have a lot of potential. We have Al-Azhar, we have the Coptic Church, we have our generations of doctors, of engineers. Don't talk, in my opinion, don't talk about politics. Don't export politics to these people. Export technicians, export people who want to cultivate, to practice agriculture. You know that if you read about China's projects and India's projects in Africa, you will be startled. Hundreds of thousands of fiddans are being cultivated as joint ventures between Beijing, the Chinese capital, and the African people, as joint ventures, not as people who come to invest. You see, joint ventures means that we cooperate, that we are no longer, we are not imperialist. We don't want, they want, the Chinese and the Indians, they are so, let's say, clever. They didn't want to remind the Africans with the imperialistic legacy of India, of France, or of England. They wanted to say that we are people belonging to the third world. We are partners in these projects, and they cultivate a lot of this land to the benefit of the Chinese people. It is an experience. We have to read a lot about what is going on now in Africa for the benefit of these third world countries, and then we go ahead on the same road.
Indeed. Mr. Mohammed, we move on from talking about the India-Africa summit, which was held in India and was attended by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, to, unfortunately, the sad event of yesterday, the crash of the Russian plane with 224 people aboard. Of course, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi did have a telephone call with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, during which he offered his deepest condolences for the victims. So how do you see the development of the crash of the plane? Of course, the investigations are taking place. Yesterday, they found the two black boxes of the plane, and a team of experts is coming to Egypt from Airbus, of course, from Germany and France, and from Russia, to follow up the investigations as well. So how do you read the development of this very sad event?
First of all, as you expressed in the opening of this program, your condolences to our Russian friends in the Federal Republic of Federal Russia, or the Federal Russian Federation. I'll add something. It's a very personal impression, yes, which started with me in this morning. On my way to the studio, I met a lot of people, drivers, ordinary people, grassroots, as we can say, Egyptian. These people feel very sad. These people feel that maybe they lost friends or relatives, something like that. This is a phenomenon which I didn't even observe for a long time.
Yes.
I think there is some very authentic feelings and relations between our people and the Russian people,
yes,
in general.
Indeed.
You see,
especially recently,
it supersedes. I say yes.
Strong ties.
There is this, as I say, this another legacy. You see, I remember in my generation, that was in the 60s when I was working in the Egyptian media, I remember the authenticity of these relations between the Russian experts or the Russian technicians who came from Russia to work in Aswan. You know that Russia, you see, the cold weather, but Grigory came and he worked under the scorching sun of Aswan, and he built some friendship with his counterparts, the Egyptian engineers and the Egyptian Upper Egypt people. I think this is something, this legacy, it was revived. And in the same time, we didn't have anything, in my opinion, negative on the part of the Russian people, either the Russian engineer or the Russian politicians or anything. But we remember in this legacy a lot of cooperation between the two peoples. Even I have read that whenever the Russian tourists came, the Egyptian people who serves them, you see, they feel comfortable. They like them to come.
And to add to what you are saying, Mr. Mohammed, that a very high percentage of the tourists coming to Egypt are from Russia.
This point is talking about how do we benefit, materially speaking. I'm talking about the
interaction as well.
Yes, the feelings, the authentic feeling, and the authentic legacy. In the same time, it is a tragedy on the human side, you see, that we have a lot of families, you see, who came to have good time in our country, and they enjoyed being in our country. Some of our people were in need of what they spent there, and they kept coming, you see, especially in Sharm el-Sheikh and Al-Ghardaqa and all these places. In the same time, these are innocent people, you see, children, ladies, men, families who came, and then they lost their lives. So on the humanistic side, it's a tragedy. In the same time, I think it touches even on the entire scene of our life in Egypt, on the economic side, on the touristic side, even on the national security side also. And therefore, I think we have to restrain ourselves during these hours and the coming days, not to go ahead and
jump to conclusions which has started yesterday, Mr. Mohammed. I've started to hear that it might be an attack, or it might be a rocket, or it might be by an act by Daesh. So how do people jump to these conclusions while still nothing is known up to this moment?
If we try to be reserved and try to
wait for the investigations,
to forget about these speculations, but indeed these speculations involve a kind of a healthy, relatively speaking, a healthy side. What is this healthy side? There's people are concerned about what happened.
Of course.
Yes, vis-a-vis the victims, which are very sad about them, and vis-a-vis also our security and our future in tourism and everything. So we have to be, as I say, to be very conservative, to be very reserved.
And cautious about what we are saying until we know the concrete results.
Yeah, we are no longer living, as you know, we are no longer living in a very reserved or a very secluded world. Everything now is on the social media. Everything now is open, you see. Open to what? As far as it's open to news, it's also open to speculations.
Yes.
And as speculations sometimes are good and authentic, sometimes they are, you know, unreserved and irresponsible in the same time. And then some people are trying to say that, well, it is a technical problem. Others, as you said, say that, well, because there was some news which were put on the social media,
of course. Claiming that Daesh might be behind that.
And then we have a lot of answers against even this claim, because the height in which the plane was going, it's impossible to reach it with a rocket or something. But in the same time, we have to be so reserved, and we have to respect the investigation, which is methodical investigation, responsible investigation, specialized investigation.
Especially because the two black boxes were actually found.
Now the two black boxes. The good thing is that the two presidents exchanged their views. Our president expressed his condolences, and in the same time the Kremlin, Mr. Putin himself, he appreciated our initiatives in which we didn't spare any effort, either in the on the military side, our army, or in the civil side, our cabinet and our administration, in order to either to honor the victims who were victims of this catastrophe, or to give all the facilities to the people who are coming.
The families of the victims.
No, I mean not all the families. I think the
experts,
the officials and the experts who are coming in order to investigate the matter, and we have to reach a very plausible and convincing result in this respect, and in the same time to learn what this catastrophe will give us as learned lessons in this respect.
Mr. Mohammed, how do you see the handling of the situation from the Egyptian government? We have seen, from my point of view, of course, that there were very rapid and efficient moves by the government, a press conference. Of course, the move by the military was very fast. How they reached the place of the crash, how they moved the victims or the victims to the morgue, and all the process were done in a very quick way. We have seen meetings between the involved ministers. We have seen also a meeting between the Prime Minister with the Minister of Defense and the Air Force Commander. So how do you see the handling of the situation on the ground?
First of all, I feel it was a responsible reaction. In the same time, I think they have this kind of impetus. Allow me to use the word emotional impetus. Egyptians are trying to render some services to Russian people. And there is, as I say, this kind of history of relations, appreciated the relations between the two countries, between the two peoples. It is not just a political relation. It was a relation between people, as I started my talk about that. So these two incentives the responsibility, the emotion and feeling. I think this, and in the same time, they know that we have to go very fast in order to try to know what's going on. It's a big catastrophe. It's not so easy. You see, you have 24 victims, people who were so innocent, and then it happened. Yes, the catastrophe happens. And we have, you know, a history, very recent history of the Malaysian, let's say.
Two Malaysian.
Yes, civil planes, I think other things, yes. German or French
yes.
plane. Anyway,
German.
So we have this history, very recent history, but in the same time, we are caring maybe so much, and that's good, that's positive, yes. about the Russian citizens who had this, who
yes.
were victims of this.
Mr. Mohammed Al-Khouli, today the investigators are going to start to investigate the incident. An expert from Egypt, from Russia, from, of course, Airbus, the main manufacturer of the plane.
From France also.
France and Germany,
we welcome them. Germany,
France and Germany, because the plane is belonging to these countries, the manufacturing countries. So, do you believe that the investigating team, with all the time which will be taken to investigate this process of the plane, what role should be done by Egypt to facilitate the work of these teams? And of course, the Russian president also ordered an emergency team to come to Egypt as well to help in the work at the scene of the plane crash. So how do you see that?
As I say, it's a package problem or a package process.
Because yes, the place where the plane fell.
Multidimensional, it involves a lot of factors and therefore a lot of people, experts who come. But I want the media, and we are part of it, as you say, as you know, the media to take to count to 10, as they say, and to take a lot.
But they did already start since yesterday. They did not count to 1.
It's a big catastrophe. Yes. But we have to cool down until we find what happened in a cool-blooded way. It is a big disaster. Yes, we feel very heavily about it. We feel very sad, you see, as I say, on the part of the grassroots, not only on the experts or the officials. You see, but in the same time, we don't have to rush to results. But the, let's say, the market of speculations is still open. Yes. Of course. Well, we'll face it. It's unavoidable. You see. But in the same time, it's unavoidable on the part of the mass media.
But we have to wait and see, Mr. Mohammed, because already we found the 2 black boxes.
You see, as we try to analyze things politically, you see. Yes. But we'll find parallel to us a lot of other sides and quarters who try to rush either to results. Either they have very negative intentions towards Egypt and also
Russia.
towards Russia. Yeah, because now they have a vendetta, you see,
for both countries,
against Russia, who is trying to participate in our emancipation from the very violent, very backwarded people who are abusing our religion, either in Iraq or in Syria. So they have a vendetta against the Russians, and in the same time, I say, you know, that a lot of quarters who have a vendetta about Egypt, about the people, about the presidency, the new regime which was established after the 30th of June and the 3rd of July. You see, a lot of vendettas, a lot of opponents, and a lot of interests. And the problem is that these interests, you see, have international connections. So we are facing a package or a multitude of factors, negative, most of them. So what we are trying to do is, as I say, be cool, not rush, don't rush to results, but in the same time try to understand what is going on the opposite side or the negative side. until we solve the problem.
Of course. Mr. Mohammed Al-Khouli, yesterday the Prime Minister, Mr. Sharif Ismail, held a press conference for the reporters, for the press, in order to explain the situation. Of course, he said that up till this moment we cannot say anything about the cause of the crash until the two boxes are, the black boxes of the plane are examined. But he said that up till this moment, no any irregularities or irregular activities were spotted on the ground or on the scene of the crash. So how do you read that?
And he was also trying to be reserved, but at the same time, he was provided by maybe a certain result or an impression from the concerned quarters in the Egyptian government that they didn't observe something
unusual,
irregular or unusual. But he didn't clarify what is this something. Is it, let's say, you didn't find, let's say, on the ground, I mean, any remnants of, let's say, shootings or
debris of...
oh yes, explosive devices. He didn't elaborate, and it's good that he was reserved as far as he knows. You see, so I respect this, but as I say, I'm reserved about holding all the time conferences about the matter.
Yes.
Before we have the absolute.
But to what extent holding such a press conference yesterday?
Yesterday it was okay.
Yes.
It was needed.
Because of course everyone was asking, and to feel that the government is moving. He did visit the site of the scene. He did visit the morgue where the bodies of the victims were taken.
He has a kind of a conference in Ismailia.
Yes.
And when he heard about the thing,
he cut short his conference and
this thing, and then he went back. That's very good. The president had the initiative, although he was just coming from Al Bahrain, and from a very tiresome and demanding trip. Yes, politically speaking. And then he had the initiative to talk to his counterpart in the Kremlin. I think until now, although we are very harsh myself, harsh critical of our government, you see, but in the same time we have to appreciate what they have taken and all over by night and day, and they are now raising to their responsibility in their positions.
Sir, do you believe that special procedure should be taken for the families of the victims in order to come to Egypt, or any procedures that should be taken regarding
yes,
that?
I have information
I believe that the families of the victims,
preparations in Egypt to welcome or to receive the families of the victims and to give them all the facilities which they needed, provided that I think in the international law, the money which is the compensations given to offered to the families are the responsibility of the company, the carrier company, and the insurance companies which have agreement with the company.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Mohammed Al-Khouli, the international media expert, thank you very much for being with us and for your precious input.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
And with that, our dear viewers, we come to the end of this edition from our program Africa Today. We had a special coverage about the India-Africa Summit, which was held in New Delhi and was attended by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi last week. And also we covered the latest developments concerning the plane crash of the Russian plane in Sinai and its repercussion. The investigating team which is coming to Egypt, and the Egyptian team as well, who are investigating the incident. And of course we would like to again send our deepest condolences for the families of the victims of the plane, the 224 people who lost their lives in the plane crash. And with that, we come to the end of this edition from our program. Hope you have enjoyed it. Until we meet again next week. I'm Histi Rabia signing off.